It's cast on day for the Idylluna Shawl. I'm really excited about this. I have yet to decide the order in which I want to knit my minis into my shawl, but I'm digging it. Whoops, can't hold them all. So I haven't totally decided on the order in which I'm going to incorporate these, but I have a little ways to go yet, and so do you before we do that. So it's cast on day, and I've knitted this little section right here, and I'm going to show you some tips for keeping track of what's going on. So before we get started with that, I want to give a big public thank you to a couple of new patrons that have joined in the last week or so. Thanks so much to Allison from Tennessee and Beth from Texas. I really appreciate your support. And also, if you're interested in getting in on the benefits I offer patrons, head over to patreon.com/PURLTOgether to see what I'm offering for various tiers of pledges. You can also become a YouTube member for I think it's $2.99 a month. And then that gets you access to members only videos, and you get a little yarn ball icon of various colors depending on how long you've been a member. Okay, let's get started with the cast on. This is a kind of a kite-shaped shawl with a head hole, and I'm pretty excited about that. Like I mentioned in the upcoming clips, this is deceptively simple. So you do have increases on each side and a center double decrease spine, so all of that's pretty straightforward. However, it is a little challenging in some areas to count and keep track of that. I did have a couple of people ask some questions straight off the bat about doing a yarn over followed by a purl, because as you know, when you do when you're purling and you go from a knit to a purl with a yarn over, there's an extra amount of yarn that gets incorporated into that. So I'm going to show you how I choose to mitigate that, so you don't have a yarn over that's significantly larger on the purl side than it is on your knit side, from side to side. So you're in charge of your knitting. You're the boss of your knitting, so you do what works best for you. A couple of tips you'll notice right away. When I first cast on, I was using my ChowGoo needles, which are stainless steel, and I really like them. However, when I knit a larger diameter needle with fingering weight yarn, it seems a little slippery, and it's also very cold here. My hands are dry. There's no humidity in Southeast Wyoming at the moment, so everything just felt really slippery to me. So I changed to these Lantern Moon needles, which are wooden, and I found that to be easier. So hopefully you can see what I'm trying to show you on camera, despite the darkness of the needle. So be sure to ask questions down below if you need to. All the links and everything will be down below in the video description. If you haven't gotten your pattern yet, there is a discount code. I'll put that as well. Okay, let's get right into it then. All right, let's get started. I'm going to cast on 2 stitches with my main color, which is this lovely kind of a dark purple. You can tie a slip knot if you want to. I'm not going to bother with a slip knot. I'm just going to fold over my yarn like that. I'm using a size 6 for this, and I'm just going to do 1 cast on in addition to my fold over loop. So there's the 2. There's my 2. That's the cast on with my main color. Now I'm starting with row 1, and I'm just going to knit 2. Okay, so at least starting off, the even numbers are going to be on the right side. So in an effort to make this as beginner friendly as possible, make sure you don't knit your tail. There's a couple things I want to point out. So we're just going to follow along with the written instructions here. There is no chart, this is going to be pretty straightforward. So I have a yarn over in the middle there, and then a knit on each side. And now we're going to begin with the purling, and we're going to have a little bit of a garter stitch edge. Kelly, the designer, was telling us we're going to have just like a 1 or 2 stitch garter stitch edge on each side as we start increasing. So I'm just working the first few rows here and being careful when you purl into that yarn over that you don't drop it. All right, we've come to the first increase, and so I'm just going to show you how to knit front back if you're new to that, or you just need a little refresher. So we're just going to go into that first stitch as if to knit, just like normal. Let me zoom in here a little bit. Go into that stitch as if to knit, and then knit right into that, and then without taking the yarn off the needle, we're just going to swing the tips around and knit into the back of that same stitch. So that's called a knit front back, because you're knitting into the front and the back of the same stitch. And so then we've increased one. All right, now we're going to knit one and knit front back again. So again, you're going to go into that stitch as if to knit right into it, without taking that stitch off the needle, swing your needle around to the back and knit into the back of it as well. Okay, so we've increased two. Okay, so I'm going to carry on knitting through several rows now that you know how to do the increase, and I'll meet you back on row 8. Okay, so I'm on row 8, and it tells us to, you're going to do your knit front back and to do your increase and then knit 2. Now I've got a ring marker here. You can use whatever marker you like, or even just a small piece of yarn. I like these little ring markers. They don't catch on anything. These are from Monster Stitches. I'll put a link down below if you're interested in grabbing some of those. I think they sell them in a set of 8 or 10. I forget. But anyway, this is going to be our center marker. And if you make sure to read the notes on the pattern about the marker being placed right before, it'll be on the right side of the center stitch. And so that way, when you're on the right side of your work, you'll have 2 stitches that are like a little garter stitch selvage edge, and then the center of the shawl is going to be stockinette for this section. And so you'll have your marker just to the right of that center stitch. So you'll want to slip the marker when you come to it on the wrong side rows. All right, the other thing I want to talk about on the wrong side rows, when you have a yarn over that is followed by a purl stitch, a regular yarn over, you're just wrapping clockwise as if you're knitting. And so if I was going to knit, I would have my yarn to the back and the next stitch would be a knit, and that would be just fine. When you're going into a purl, though, you need to continue around. So there's your wrap, your yarn over, but then you got to continue around and yarn forward to do your purl stitch. Now, often when you do that, that will create a yarn over that is extra large. There's a couple ways you can mitigate that. One, if you notice that's happening, instead of doing a traditional yarn over by going around, you can simply go in as if to purl and do it like a mini yarn over and go in and purl. And so there's your yarn over right there. Now that might end up being too short depending on your tension. So what I'm telling you is there's 2 ways to go about this. If you find that you have an elongated yarn over and it's too big, then you might try that by just bringing your yarn over the top of the needle to create a yarn over when you're going into a purl stitch. So that's going to be like half the length of yarn that you would use for that stitch to create the yarn over, as opposed to doing a whole yarn over, then bringing the yarn forward again for the purl stitch. So you can do that. If you want to do it that way and do the traditional yarn over so you have the whole length, then you just want to tighten this up just a little bit. Otherwise, you may very well have bigger yarn overs on one side of your shawl than the other side. And maybe that's okay with you, but I like things to be a little more even than that. Okay, so I need a purl 5 here. I'm just going to slip this on the wrong side of my work. And now, when I come to the other side here, I'm going to yarn over, and I'm knitting the last 2. So yarn over is just simply taking the yarn to the back here and knitting the last 2. So you see the hole that made? So you can see the difference between that. So I would experiment with that a little bit and decide what's going to work best for you so that you have the same size holes on each end of your shawl. I hope that makes sense. I'll show you that again when we get down the road a little bit, a few more rows in on our project. All right, I'm on row 11 and we've come to our first central double decrease. Now this is the way that the designer has delineated a spine. So we're going to have a central double decrease here, which is going to make a line down the middle of the shawl, and it's going to look really cool. But because we have this marker here, we need to negotiate that we need to deal with that. So we're just going to slip this stitch as if to purl off to the right hand side. We've removed the marker and we slip the stitch back to the left hand needle, making sure it's not twisted. Now we're going to put the marker back because we don't want to lose it, and we want it to end up being right before our center stitch. So now we're going to take the right hand needle and go in these two stitches as if we're going to knit them together. I'm going to slip them off together knitwise. And then go ahead and knit the next stitch just like normal. And then take these two that we slipped together and pull them both up over the top of that, the one we just knitted. So then your marker will be right before the center double decrease, and then those two stitches lay nice and flat right there on top. And that's going to create a nice spine right down the center. All right, then we're going to knit 3, 2, 3, and do a knit front back to complete this row. Okay, all of that was row 10. I think I misspoke earlier and said that was row 11, but that was row 10 on the right side, the stockinette stitch. And so row 11, we're just going to follow the instructions, and then we're just going to end up repeating row 10 and 11 a whole bunch of times. Okay, one more time. We're going to knit to 1 stitch before the marker because we need to use this knit stitch in our central double decrease maneuver. So slip that over to the right hand side and remove your marker. Then take this needle, take this stitch back to the left and then replace the marker. And now we can do our central double decrease. So again, slip these 2 stitches as if to knit, like you're going to go in and do a knit 2 together. Take those over to the right hand needle, knit the next stitch, and then slip those 2 together over the top. And then I just kind of give it a little bit of a tug and straighten everything out. Then we're just knitting to the last stitch. Now, what's going to happen here, you'll notice I had a little wonkiness there because I did the other maneuver where when I had the yarn over on the purl side, I just brought the yarn over. I didn't do the whole wrap. So what that looks like is it almost looks like a German short row or a twin stitch. So if you're going to choose to do that, you're going to want to bring that yarn over to the right hand needle and then put it back on the left hand needle oriented correctly so it looks like a proper knit stitch. So you will need to reorient that yarn over if you choose to do it that way. I'll show you that again. Because that's how I'm going to do it. I think it makes more sense to do it that way and keep my yarn overs more of an equitable size. So I'll show you that again. I'm now on the wrong side on row 11 and I'm going to knit 2, yarn over. And what follows is a purl stitch. So the pattern would like for you to, normally you bring the yarn forward as if you're going to carry on purling, but you need to do your yarn over. So that means an extra wrap. So that introduces a full 360 degrees or a full needle circumference worth of yarn. But when we switch from a purl to a knit, we don't introduce that much yarn. We just go over the top of the needle when we do it on the other end of our row. So I'm just going to go in as if to purl and go ahead and purl that by bringing the yarn over the top of that needle. That does not introduce as much yarn into my yarn over, and it makes it so I need to watch when I come back and reorient that, but I think it will make the yarn over holes the same size. Okay, so we're going to purl along here until we get to the other end, and then I'll show you what I mean by how it looks and the amount of yarn that's introduced when you go from a purl to a knit. So we get to the last 2 stitches, we want to do another yarn over, and we would simply lay this over the top and take the yarn to the back, which is exactly the opposite of what we did at the other end. Now the only difference is that when we knit back this other direction, this yarn over is oriented the correct way, with the right leg forward. Whereas this yarn over is going to require See how that's funky? That's going to require me to change it. Be sure to drop a comment down below if that's confusing at all, but that's mostly what I wanted you to understand. You can do the traditional yarn over as written in the pattern if you'd like. There's nothing wrong with that. It may produce a different size yarn over, and if you're okay with that, then it's your shawl and you're the boss of your knitting. And it may resolve with blocking as well. It depends on everybody's individual tension. So again, we're one stitch before the marker, but we need to use this stitch in our central double decrease. So I'm slipping this over as if to purl, remove the marker, slip it back, return the marker, and then we'll go in at these 2 stitches as if to knit, purl, knit the next stitch, and then slip these 2 right on over. Okay. So now we're going to come up to now be careful that you don't knit into this the way it is. You can see that that's wonky, right? You can see that that's totally weird. So I'm pushing these 2 stitches here with my left index finger so I don't lose them or they don't pop off. And then I'm just taking that needle through to straighten out those 2 and then tuck it back in so that your yarn over is oriented correctly on your left hand needle. And then carry on to the end of the row. And we'll do our increase as indicated. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Be sure to drop a comment down below if you have any questions. But now you can see that that spine is starting to show up really nicely. Okay, now we're going to carry on back and forthing like this, doing our increases on each side and the central double decrease until we have a total of 81 stitches in this section. Take note at the top of page 4, about the number of stitches that you have, and when you're doing increasing, that's a good thing to be aware of. All right, I'm going to go through rows 10 and 11 one more time, and just to recap the things that I have discovered as I've done a few rows here. The first thing that you can tell is that you've got this eyelet thing going on here with just a 2-stitch garter edge, and you can see a pattern where you have actually 2 stitches between each hole. Sometimes it might look like just one because the other one's tucked behind, but just be mindful of that. So if you're going along and your stitch count is off, that's something to look at for a potential error point. Okay, so talking about stitch count, I went ahead and removed the marker in the center because I can plainly see the spine. That's going to be your very center stitch, and then the 2 on either side are what you use to make your central double decrease. So I just found that to be a little bit cumbersome over and over to remove the marker and put it back on, or remove it and put it back on. You do what works best for you, but I just preferred not to have it because obviously that spine is, plainly visible right up to that very center stitch. So talking about that, these 3 stitches are going to be involved in that center double decrease. So as the center, not counting those 3, I have been keeping track of each side. So at the moment, I think I have 28 stitches here, the 3 in the center, and 28 stitches on the other side. So as you're working along, make sure that you're being mindful of that those match up. So if you end up having, differing counts on each side of your center spine, then clearly there's an error, and you can choose to correct that as you go or track it down, reading your knitting going back. So let me show you what I've decided to do to mitigate those errors. It's a deceptively simple looking pattern. It does require paying attention. And I was watching Netflix last night and made several mistakes. So let me show you what I've discovered for myself. So on the right side, when we have the stockinette or the knit side facing us, that is not going to increase any stitches because we're going to do a knit front back at the beginning and a knit front back at the end. But then we're going to cancel that out by doing a central double decrease. So our stitch count's going to remain the same. Okay, so knit front back. And because we've increased, there's 2 stitches on the needle. Then there's a 3rd, and then your yarn over from before should be your 4th stitch. So now I'm knitting toward the center, being mindful as I go that I do not have a marker Whoops, I almost missed that one. I do not have a marker in the center. So I'm getting toward the center here. You'll notice I have one more stitch to knit before I'm at my 3 center stitches. So there's the spine, and I'm at the 3 in the middle. So I'm just going to do my central double decrease, slipping those 2 together as if to knit the next stitch, and slide those 2 right back over. Okay, carry on knitting across. Okay, now remember on the other side, it was the 4th stitch from the edge after we did that knit front back. Then that yarn over was the 4th stitch. So that's one thing to keep in mind and look for. Unless you did the full wraparound on the purl side, you're going to have this wonky business here, which is your purl yarn over. And so make sure that you watch for that. And what I like to do is keep in mind, I'm going to go really slow here, and see how we have the stitch and then we have the right and left leg of the row below. I'm looking for the right leg of the stitch just before that yarn over, just to make sure that I don't want to miss that. I don't want to have anything crossways. Okay, so the yarn over goes between this, the legs of this stitch are pulled to the back because of how we did it, but you're going to want to knit this one just like normal. So I like to watch for this leg right here and then knit this one like normal. And again, I'm pressing my index finger to the back of that needle to keep everything where it's supposed to be. Then I'm going to grab that yarn over from underneath right here. I'm going to grab that and take it through. So there's the yarn over, and you'll notice that it's oriented incorrectly. So if I put it back on that needle, you'll notice it's backwards. So I'm just going to switch that around so the right hand leg is toward me and to the right. Then I'm just going to knit into that like normal. So that was the 3rd stitch from the end, but keep in mind we haven't done our increase yet, the knit front back, in the last stitch. So it will mirror the other side in just a moment. So I hope that helps a little bit. Look for what to look for. You won't have to be quite that much of a detective if you do decide to do your purl with the full wrap, the purl yarn over. But you may have that elongated hole, which you can totally mitigate that by evening out your tension later on with blocking, or just easing, taking up some of that slack stitch by stitch using a DPN or whatever later. So now I'm going to go in as if to knit because I'm doing the border stitches. Now on the wrong side, we're just going to purl all the way across, and so we don't have any decreases, but we do have our yarn overs. So the wrong side is where we're actually increasing our stitch count by 2, 1 on each end. Okay, so again, if you want to do the full purl around wrap, that's totally fine. I am choosing not to, and I'm choosing just to go into the next stitch as if to purl and lay that over the top. So let me turn this over and I'll show you something else real quick. If you decide you want to do the full wrap as indicated by the pattern, and if you, as a result, notice that any of these holes are a little bit too big, you can always just take a DPN and mess about with it and adjust your tension across that row. So I'll leave that up to you. You're the boss of your knitting. All right, so we're going to carry on doing these 2 rows until we have 81 stitches total, or 40 on each side of our center stitch. Okay, I hope you found those tips to be helpful. Again, if you have any questions, be sure to holler in the Ravelry group or tag me on Instagram. I'd like to see your start. Don't you think it looks like a uterus? I always think the beginning of a shawl looks like a uterus, or man underwear. Okay, I digress. It's time to go. All right. I hope you have a good week. Thanks for watching, and tag me at Purl_together on Instagram. And show me what yarn you've chosen and how your beginnings are coming along.